All right. Welcome to Pro Football's first 50 years, where we take the past and we bring it back to life. Now, you can go online, and I'm talking about the first 50 years, from 1920 to 1970. You can go on, especially if you go back into the 20s and the 30s. You can find the score of the game. You can find maybe a box score, who scored a touchdown, how far the field goal was, maybe what the attendance was, obviously what stadium it was in. Maybe you can find the starting lineups, for each team. But exactly what happened during each and every game in the first 50 years of pro football? Well, thanks to old newspaper articles, we get to take a little bit of a deeper dive into each and every game. Now, just a little news flash here for you. I don't want to upset some people. There ain't no fancy videos here, okay? I do apologize. All there is you and me for the next 30 to 60 minutes. So that's all right with you. Let's get it on. And today's game just happens to be Vince Lombardi's third game. Another preseason game. Now, back then, they were playing 6 preseason games. This at 1959, they were still playing 12-game season. 1960, when they expanded to 13 teams when the Dallas Cowboys came into the league, they were still playing a 12-game season. Finally, in 1961, when the Minnesota Vikings joined, they had a 14-game season, 14 teams, 14 games. So, but it's back then, 6 preseason games. Now, this one, very interestingly, which was something quite common back then, was played in. I'm raising my hand. I'm the first one of it. I am a moron. All right. So if I pronounce the name wrong, I apologize. Pronouncing names is not my specialty. Could be Multnomah Stadium out in Oregon. Now, something that happened quite a bit back then was, and I'll show you with the Eagles and the Packers. Both of them played 4 games, outside of their normal territory, shall we say. But this game was out in Oregon. Something that was common back then. But also, quite interestingly, in 1959, because in 1960, the AFL came to town. Quite possibly some of these games were being played in other markets to see where other markets could be played professional football. 1960 rolled around. Of course, I've just previously mentioned the Dallas Cowboys popped up. They went from 12 teams to 13 teams. So Dallas went, obviously, and popped up in Dallas, but the Dallas Texans of the AFL popped up. And they could not compete with the Dallas Cowboys of the NFL. So after a few seasons, I can't remember if they were there for 3 seasons. I think in 63 they moved to Kansas City, where now they're the Kansas City Chiefs. But also interestingly, in 1959, the Chicago Cardinals would play their final season in Chicago. And in 1960, they moved to St. Louis, which obviously we all know is just a fantastic sports market. Obviously, baseball, the football, hockey. They had basketball there, not anymore. But I guess quite possibly it does help. If you have a winner, I guess quite possibly that's one of the reasons why they never seem to take off that well in St. Louis. They had a couple some nice teams may actually make the playoffs and all, but nothing of any special importance. But this game, interestingly, I say, let me show you I'll show you the Packers schedule. I'll show the Eagles schedule. The Packers' first 2 games were played in the normal team cities. Like they played in Kezar Stadium, the home of the 49ers. They played the first game of the season at home against the Chicago Bears. And then they would go on the road after this, and they would start playing a bunch of 4 games at a market. And we'll show you exactly where they played them at. All right, here we go. They said the first game of the season, they lost to the Bears. The Bears scored a touchdown in the final it was 40 seconds or so of the game, and they would prevail. The Bears would beat the Packers 19-16. The following, I mean, the Bears, this is the first year of Vince Lombardi going to the Packers. The Packers were 1-10-1 in 1958. He turned them around. Needless to say, in 1959 they went to 7-5. But they were the doormats of the NFL. 1958. The Bears, won in the final minute of the game. Now, once again, it's all exhibition. But the 49er game, R.C. Owens caught an alley-oop pass from Y.A. Tittle. And he got tackled at about the 1 yard line as time expired. So, or the 49ers might have came back and tied this game. But you'll notice here with the Packers, their first one, the Bear game was played in County Stadium in Milwaukee, where the Packers were playing their home games. This one was played at Kezar Stadium in San Francisco, where the 49ers play their home games. But then the next 4 games the Packers played were all out of market. This one here, the Packers and the Eagles flew all the way across the country to Portland, Oregon. Then the next game, they played the Giants in Bangor, Maine. Then they played the Redskins in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Then the final exhibition game of the 1959 season, they played the Pittsburgh Steelers in Bloomington, Minnesota. But, obviously, at Metropolitan Stadium, where the Minnesota Vikings took up home 2 years later in 1961. So some of it, quite possibly, some of it, as I said, this was kind of commonplace. Let's go back to the 1958 season. The Packers played the Giants in Boston. Then they played the Redskins, once again, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. The Cardinals in Bloomington. They only played 5 preseason games. Let's go back to 57. How did they do there? Once again, they were a crappy team, 3-9. They played the Cardinals. They played the Cardinals 2 times, for crying out loud, in the 1957 preseason. They played them in Miami, Florida. Then they played them in Austin, Texas. My goodness, you're playing, middle of August in Miami, Florida. Wow. Middle toward the end of August in Austin, Texas. How hot was it there? Wow. Then they played the Eagles in Milwaukee, at their home stadium. But then they played the Giants once again in Boston. Then they played, once again, the Redskins. They played them in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, once again. And then, of course, they played again the game in Bloomington, Minnesota. So something certainly not out of the ordinary back then. Nowadays, for the most part, I'm a Giant fan, unfortunately. But, if the Giants are playing a home game at home, they're playing in MetLife Stadium. If they're playing the Green Bay Packers, per se, in exhibition, they're playing, for the most part, a good chance it's going to be at Lambeau Field. Not so much back then. I said some of it also had to do with that, I believe, obviously in 1960, the AFL coming around, and the NFL wanted to see where it would be good to do some expansion, because if there's a couple good cities, because remember, in 1959, there was only 12 teams in the NFL. And of course, in 1960, the AFL started out with 8 teams. So the NFL could sneak into another city or two, some really good football-loving cities, and take some thunder and some fire away from the AFL. The NFL was all for it. All right, then you go same thing here with the Eagles, right? The Eagles, their first 4 games were all out of market. Then their final 2 preseason games were, let's say, as you see here, their 5th exhibition game was against the Colts. That was played at Franklin Field, their home stadium. Then they played the Rams out in the Memorial Coliseum out Los Angeles. But their first 4 games, they played the Giants in Hershey, Pennsylvania, at Hershey Stadium. Held a grand, there was 12,000 people there. Then they played the Chicago Bears in Lynn, Massachusetts, at the Manning Bowl. Not quite sure how many people were there. I mean, then they played obviously the Green Bay Packers. They flew all the way out to Portland, Oregon. A nice amount of people there. It's a nice size stadium. I'm going to show you the stadium here. It's 24,000 people there. Then they played the Lions in Toledo, Ohio, at the Glass Bowl. Only 9,500 people there. But interestingly enough, also 1930 to 1933, the first four seasons were the Portsmouth Spartans. 1934, they became the Detroit Lions. And of course, Portsmouth is in Ohio. So the Lions, it all started for the Lions in Portsmouth, Ohio. Not Toledo, but it was in Ohio. 1934, they went to Detroit and became the Lions. But as I said, so you see the first four games the Eagles played were all like out of market. Hershey, Pennsylvania, but Massachusetts, Oregon, and Ohio. Right. So let me go show you. We'll go over, talk a little bit about the stadium right now. Nice stadium. Hosted a lot of different events. One of them, I believe it was 1957. I'll show you if I remember. Elvis Presley was there. 1957. All right, let me see here. Okay, we go. So also it was called Providence Park, I believe it was, but okay, Providence Park, originally Multnomah Stadium, and from 1893 until the stadium was built, Multnomah Field. It's an outdoor soccer venue. The Goose Hollow neighborhood of Portland, Oregon. So right now it's predominantly, I guess it's been, reconstructed or however you want to talk about, but pretty much it's just a soccer stadium. I mean, I guess it hosts concerts and all of that, but see here Providence Park has been the home of the Timbers since 1975. Interestingly enough, the stadium has been the host to several major United States soccer events, including U.S. national team matches. Soccer Bowl 77, which was the championship final of the 1977 NASL season. I used to follow. I used to be in 1977. I moved here in 77, but during the soccer season of 77, I was in Long Island, and we moved here in October. But the Cosmos, that was my team back then, the Cosmos, took on the Seattle Sounders. The match was played on August 28, 1977. So it was played about 2 months before I moved to New Jersey here at the Civic Stadium in Portland. The game was also noteworthy as the final competitive match for Pele, the Brazilian star and widely known. Pele was on the Cosmos then. So, pretty much a big soccer. Yeah, it's big for its soccer. The Portland-based Multnomah Athletic Club was founded in 1891 and soon constructed the stadium for their amateur sports teams beginning in 1893. It was renovated in 2001 to accommodate the Timbers and the Portland Beavers. Baseball. Uh, 2019 expansion raised the capacity to 25,000. Description: Providence Park is an outdoor soccer stadium that houses the MLS Portland Timbers and the NWSL, the ladies Portland Thorns. So here's a Civil War game being held at Multnomah Stadium in 1908. Since 1893, the site has been home to Multnomah Field, which consisted of sports fields with various grandstands. So you can see right here an aerial view of the stadium. So you can definitely see, without question, you can certainly house a decent amount of people in there. I guess it couldn't come up here too much because you got it looks like you got a roadway over here. They did some renovations to it. Providence Park in 1956, showing the baseball field. And you can certainly see without question, you see here, looks like a football, either football or soccer, right? See the outline of a right? So 1956, some renovations were done to it. The first major after its full construction. Full construction was 1926, so it took them 30 years before they did some kind of renovations to it. So pretty much a lot of soccer gets played there. Now, if I scroll down here a little bit, current tenants, MLS, right, NWSL. Oh, and the American Ultimate Disc League. Interesting. Keep scrolling. Portland Thorns, former tenants. Before the city purchased the stadium, it was owned by the Multnomah Athletic Club. There we go. Soccer. Is that it here? Yeah, August 27th. Stadium was the site of the North American Soccer League soccer ball between the Cosmos and the Seattle Sounders. Cosmos were good back then. But what I loved about the North American Soccer League back then, there was like almost no defense. Like a game would be like 8-3, 7-5. I mean, it was a lot of goals got scored. There was weren't many 2-1, 1-0. Wasn't a lot of that. It was a lot of goals. But, let's see. Oh, here you go. Yeah. Cosmos beat the Seattle Sounders 2-1. I'll say you got 2-1. Make me look like an idiot. But there were a lot of games that a lot of goals were scored. If I scroll down here. Okay, we got football. Known as Multnomah Stadium at the time, the venue was formally dedicated on October 9th, 1926, as University of Washington football team beat University of Oregon 23-9, with more than 24,000 fans in attendance. A night football game at Providence Park, then known as Multnomah Stadium, in the 50s. So this is kind of what it would look like. A couple kids back here trying to sneak a look at, right? But this is what it looked like. The field looked like. This is in the 50s. So there you go. This is almost what it looked like between the Packers and the Eagles. The only one thing is that the goalpost here would be on the goal line. So see the goal. You can't even see the goalpost here. They would be on the goal line right here. So they had to move them there. But other than that, this is what the field looked like. Almost exactly. This is interesting. During a November 9th, 1980 game, Neil Lomax threw for 7 first-quarter touchdowns against Delaware State. The Vikings won 105-0. 105-0. There you go. 2015, the Oregon High School State Football Championship between Jesuit High School and West Lynn High School. There you go. So you see, obviously, you got the soccer field there, but you see it easily fits a football field in there, too. You see the baseball game in 1974. Right? I mean, you can certainly see, easily, whatever, 20, 25,000 people can fit in there. Nice size stadium. The same thing, with the Portland Beaver baseball game. But concerts, here we go. September 2nd, 1957, Elvis Presley. There he is, the king of rock and roll. So I'll show you a couple. I got just a couple other pictures here to show. Got some images here. All right, here we go. Multnomah Civic Stadium, maintained by Multnomah Athletic Club. Multnomah Field, Portland, Oregon. Let's see here. What do we got? I don't know what the heck this is. Oh, I see goalposts. Maybe this, well, obviously this is, the fans are, the stands are packed with fans here. I see goalposts here, so maybe this is, I don't know. Just before a football game. Obviously, it's like a, one of those cards you can mail. Here we got an aerial view. See right there, obviously, you can see nice amount of stands. I said, I guess they couldn't come out over here too much, right? And it's really expanded out over here with a big, because you got the street right here. But you can certainly see here, a decent amount of people. And you can see it obviously here. Right. Must be a football game going on. You got the goalposts, everything's all lined up. And you see, with the stands here, there's people here, and obviously, some people here, but they got all of this. Yeah, you can easily see 25,000 people or so. Must have been a pretty popular game. This looks like there's lots of people there. Doesn't say what date this is. We got this. This one here. There's a little bit of a different view. Once again, here's before you see, you got the street here. So that's why you come and maybe get the, you see, you got a thin row of people over here. That's why I guess you couldn't come out and really expand out over here because of the street. But they did the best they could. That's the way a lot of the ballparks were back then. They were constructed. All of them, I guess all of them were constructed in between city streets. What else we got here? A couple more. Here's a nice color one. Once again, right? At the street. See the soccer field in there. Here's the postcard once again. With a view of the postcard, I guess it's something of the stadium, right? The stands. This one, where was that at? Oh, here. I guess it must be maybe the construction of it, maybe. Wow. A lot of lumber. So it's got a lot of use to it. Been used a lot. Got a lot of use out of it. A lot of use. And obviously one of them, of course, was the football. Not sure what the heck that is. All right, well, so let's get on with the game, Jen. I got 4 articles. This game was played on Saturday. Now, usually because we're talking to Green Bay Packers, the Green Bay Press-Gazette. Now, once we get into the regular season, the shocker, 1959, there was no Monday Night Football. So games were played on Sunday. There was no Thursday night football, no Monday night football, no Sunday night football. Sunday afternoon football. But the Green Bay Press-Gazette followed the Packers like no other paper. Let me tell you what. So they always had a phenomenal coverage of the Green Bay Packers. They would have a description of the game, but they would also have pretty much like a play-by-play description of what happened in each Packer game. Now, that was when the games were on a Sunday. Thing was that back then, the Green Bay Press-Gazette didn't have Sunday papers. So a game that was played on Saturday, there was no coverage of it on Sunday paper in the Green Bay Press-Gazette because there was no Green Bay Press-Gazette paper on Sunday. So the Green Bay Press-Gazette put a story out there on Monday's paper, but they didn't do a play-by-play or nothing like that. But once we get into the regular season, the Green Bay Press-Gazette, you'll know what happened play-by-play of every Packer game. It's crazy. But I got 4 articles. First 2 are some nice ones. They're both from Oregon papers. One's from the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Eagles paper, and then the other one will be the Green Bay Press-Gazette. So first one we're going to take a crack at here will be the Oregon Daily Journal. All right. And there's also some pictures involved in there as well, too. All right, so let's go. The August 30th edition, 1959, page 33 of the Oregon Daily Journal. Here we go. Green Bay floods over Philadelphia. Now, interestingly, though, obviously the Packers would prevail in this game, but it was 45-28. The Eagles scored in every quarter. They scored a touchdown in every quarter. The Packers scored in every quarter. The thing was, the Packers scored 24 points in the second quarter, and that was the 17-point difference. First quarter, third quarter, and the fourth quarter, both teams scored a touchdown. Second quarter, the Eagles scored a touchdown, but as I said, the Packers scored in the second quarter 24 points, and that was the difference. Norm Van Brocklin had a phenomenal game. He had well over 300 yards passing. He had threw for 3 touchdowns, I believe it was, but he also threw 3 interceptions. But here we go. We got Lou Carpenter burst for 2 yards through the mob scene for Green Bay's second score. So if it was the second score, must be in the second quarter because they scored 1 touchdown in the first quarter. That is interesting. It's with the lighting and the pictures and all that. This is what you got. You can, if you're lucky, you can see the players, but other than that, in the back, it's just dark. It's like there was no lights like that. It's just interesting. All right, so ex-Beaver Francis of these with the Packers leads a 45-28 win. Joe Francis may still be a rookie in the fierce business of professional football, but he is rapidly losing that green-tinted description. Well, yeah, I hate to be a bearer of bad news, I guess, but yeah, his football career was nothing super spectacular. But he did well in this game. The former all-everything from Oregon State College opened his second year in the National Football League Saturday night in Multnomah Stadium with a cool and almost flawless performance in guiding Green Bay Packers to a 45-28 victory over the Philadelphia Eagles. It was a case of Francis, the rookie, whipping Norm Van Brocklin, the old pro, but in defense of the former and still exciting Webfoot Warrior. It must be pointed out that Francis had some able help from the rugged Packer linemen. The Eagles had the Dutchman and electrifying Tommy McDonald and not enough of anything else. A crowd of 25,456 fans saw everything that pro football has to offer on a balmy summer evening. A bundle of touchdowns, driving runs, seemingly impossible pass catching, and flying fists. Imagine that. 2 brief outbursts flared on the field, one of them causing the ejection of guard Fred Fuzzy Thurston of the Packers and back Tom Brookshire of the Eagles. Yeah, Tommy Brookshire. He was He was he was fierce on the field. It was, from what I understand, it was like he had a tackle on Paul Hornung. I forgot what year it was, but it caused some damage to Hornung's back. It was like, it might have been it was in 1966, I think it might have been, and Paul Hornung didn't even play in Super Bowl I. He was on the sideline all the time. His back was messed up. The other was a 3-touchdown spree in the second period by the Packers that put the game on ice. The clubs matched touchdowns, one each in each of the other 3 periods. Francis, a converted single-wing tailback, led the Packers to 5 touchdowns in the 2.5 quarters he played. He scored no touchdowns, but his passing, 6 completions in 8 attempts for 167 yards, and careful generalship kept the Packer machine operating in high gear. All right, so we got continued on page 36, column 1. So let's go a couple. All right, here we go. And here's Francis, number 20, listening to Coach Vince Lombardi. Ex-Beaver Joe Francis must have listened well to instructions from Green Bay coach Vince Lombardi because he passed brilliantly against the Eagles Saturday night. Francis sparkles for Green Bay. Approximately 300 yards of the 414 total gain by the Packers. The Packers had a jinx working for them over the Eagles, 13 victories in 14 games since 1933, but they didn't sit back and wait for it to help them. In fact, they had to come from behind in the second quarter. They not only overhauled the Eagles in this period, but rushed right by them to get a 31-14 lead at the halftime. It was, in the main, a well-balanced, eager, and aggressive Packer offense against an almost single-handedly offense in the person of Van Brocklin for the Eagles. The 33-year-old former LA star hurled 40 passes in a desperate attempt to match the Packers' scoring parade. 24 of these were completed, 11 of them that Oklahoma's flashy Tommy McDonald, and 4 went for touchdowns. But this was not enough to offset the line-bursting charge of the Packard forward wall, which repeatedly opened wide holes in the Eagle defenses through which a string of Packer pounded out impressive yardage. Now, this would be the 3rd consecutive game that the Packers, the Lombardi, right? The Lombardi sweep, all that stuff, right? Their first game against the Bears, I believe, if I remember correctly, they had like 190 yards rushing. Sorry, I got my dog's laying in front of my legs. Lombardi came in there. I'll tell you what, he drilled. Got to get the running game going, and that they did. Packers scored 6 touchdowns in all, each by a different player. So diversified was the attack. 5 came as climaxes to drives, as 6 came on a 30-yard interception by Auburn's Bob Freeman, who picked off a Van Brocklin pass near the sidelines and scooted unmolested into the end zone. Only Van Brocklin, his arm swinging in disgust, was near Freeman as the latter zoomed into the end zone. The Packers got the upper hand early in the first period when a 53-yard pass run operation from Francis to Alex Hawkins set up a 10-yard touchdown run by versatile halfback Paul Hornung 2 plays later. The Eagles matched this score with one of their own on the next series. Van Brocklin opened his drive with a 7-yard run of desperation when his receivers were blanketed. 4 Van Brocklin passes zoomed the Eagles to the 7-yard line. A little flip to Walt Kowalski gave the Eagles their first score. Kowalski. A spectacular catch, most of his R by Tommy McDonald, shot the Eagles ahead 14-7 when the agile 5'10" end leaped high in the air to pull down one of Van Brocklin's 44-yard heaves for the score. But then the Packers came up with Pro Football's best asset, a high-speed offense which collected 24 points in 13 minutes. Fullback Howard Ferguson, a 200-pounder who didn't play college football, and Lou Carpenter, whom the Packers obtained in a trade only this year from Cleveland, spearheaded the first score with Carpenter smashing over the first score from 2 yards out. Francis completed 3 passes on this series. A fumble by the Eagles' Sonny Jurgensen, sitting in for Van Brocklin, led to 3 points when Horning booted a 21-yard field goal for a 17-14. Well, it says a 17-14 Eagle lead. It couldn't be. It'd be a 17-14 Packer lead. Jurgensen was a victim again moments later when Freeman, a pass interception specialist this night, picked off his first aerial theft of the game. He scooted to the Eagle 23 before being downed. 3 plays later, Don McElhaney, the former SMU star, ate up the final 4 yards for a 24-14 Packer lead. Freeman's TD interception of Van Brocklin's shot intended for Bobby Walston followed on the very next play from scrimmage, and the Packers were out in front 31-14 at the half. A 44-yard gain on a pinpoint pass from Francis to Horning led to a 38-14 lead. Taylor finishing up the job from 5 yards out when he found a Packer-manufactured hole in the Eagle defensive line. Van Brocklin's second TD heave to McDonald cut the margin to 38-21 a few moments later. And once again, it was a typical McDonald catch, a leaping, driving, all-out stretch barely inside the goal line boundary. The Eagles tried to get back into a threatening position right after the fourth period opened when Van Brocklin completed 3 passes for 79 yards and finally sent Clarence Peaks into the end zone from 2 yards out. But the Packers put it beyond reach 5 minutes later when they swarmed all over punter Jerry Norton and captured the ball on the 41. An interference penalty on a Bart Starr pass, he replaced Francis midway in the third quarter, put the Packers on the 13. Now, let's not forget, right? I mean, this is the first year from Vince Lombardi. Bart Starr was not the Hall of Fame quarterback directing the Lombardi sweep. He was not the quarterback, taking the team to championships in 61, 62, 63, 65, 66, 67, right? 60, 61, and 62. I'm sorry, 60, 61, 62. 65, 66, 67, 63, and 64 they didn't make the playoffs for the championship game. But started at a earn his way into the starting lineup. So an interference penalty on a Bart Starr pass put the Packers on the 13. Hawkins smashed his way to the 11, and Ferguson finished up the job by diving over a massive lineman at the goal line. The 45-28 affair, was just short of the all-time Portland exhibition record of a 63-21 set by the Rams and the Cardinals here 2 years ago. All right, so we're going to talk about over here in just a second. This is interesting. It gave the Packers their second victory in 3 starts this year and left the Eagles at 1-2 mark on the still young season. It's exhibition. Right? So you got to say that 7-7, and each of the first, the third, and the fourth period, each team scored a touchdown. The Eagles scored a touchdown there, but the Packers scored 24 points. Now let's see here. All right, here we go. Talk about this here. NFL talks expansion. Houston, Texas. George Halas, chairman of the National Football League's expansion committee, today recommended that Houston and Dallas be added to the professional football circuit in 1961. Well, Dallas was added in 1960. Houston wound up going to the AFL. Art Rooney, owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, joined Halas, the owner of the Chicago Bears, in a recommendation that will go before the long-established league at its January meeting. The National League thus fired the opening gun in its possible life-or-death fight with the proposed American Football League, backed by youthful, energetic Lamar Hunt, Dallas oil man and son of one of the world's richest men. Houston and Dallas were the anchor cities of the 6 already signed for the new league. Yeah, the Houston Oilers and the Dallas Texans. Hunt and the other American franchise owners had reached agreement with Bert Bell, commissioner of the National League, that there would be no player raids. Other cities in the American League, which hoped to start playing in the fall of 1960, were New York, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Denver, and Los Angeles. Well, Los Angeles would have the Chargers, Denver would have the Broncos, New York would have the Titans. Minneapolis, no, it did not. That did not happen. That was a no-no. 1961, Minneapolis had the Vikings of the NFL. All right, what do we got here? What do we got? There's the Dutchman. And, he still had it, right? Because in 1960, the Eagles wound up winning the championship. They beat these very Packers 17-13 at Franklin Field. Lombardi says that Francis passes better in the game than in practice. And this was continued from the first page here. So let me go back to that real fast there. There's a small story here. Francis passing surprises. Joe Francis came home a hero. The Oregon State tailback of Rose Bowl year came back to the Oregon as a pro quarterback, adept at passing as well as running. There was a question about Francis' ability to make it as a pro. It had to be his passing. Saturday night, as he led the Green Bay Packers to a whopping 45-28 exhibition victory over the defenseless Philadelphia Eagles at Multnomah Stadium, he was a passer-stamped pro. His coach, Vince Lombardi, said as much after the game. He hurried for a bus, right? Say. Behind his team, answering questions on one side, counting players on the other. Lombardi, in his first year as head man of Green Bay, isn't one to bestow lavish praise. He doesn't build a player to the sky. But for Francis, Lombardi had praised Saturday night. He frankly admitted Francis impressed him. It was his passing that impressed me, Lombardi said. He's a lot better passer in a game than he is in practice. Francis could have earned his spot on the Packer team Saturday night. It was the third Green Bay exhibition of the season, but the first in which Francis has seen action. Yeah, I don't remember hearing his name at all in the first two games against the Bears and against the 49ers. He saw plenty in this one. It was until midway in the third quarter that Lombardi took him out of the offensive lineup. The Packers have four quarterbacks on their roster: Francis, Bart Starr, Babe Pirelli, and Lamar McCann. When the season starts, it'll be three. One of them has to go. Francis, in his pro debut of the year, won the cheers, but he had to share them with Norm Van Brocklin, the old master. Norm Van Brocklin passed and directed with the finesse expected, but that was the difference. Van's artistic work with the football was expected. Francis still is an unproven as a pro. And let me see here. Where are we at here? Where are we at? Up to the top here, up to the top. Yeah, all right. Well, you can see all of this right here, right? All the stats. Rushing plays, 229 yards rushing. They ran the ball 40 times. Total net yards, 220. So they averaged 5.5 yards a carry. Whew. They only threw 16 passes, while the Eagles threw 43. They had 4 of them intercepted. They had 400 yards. So they wound up 467 yards total offense. Packers only had 414, but they controlled the game with all the runs. 21 first downs for the Eagles, 24 for the Eagles. Packers punted once for the 17-yard punt. The Eagles punted 2 times, averaged 21.5 yards. That's horrible. Packers fumbled 4 times, lost 3 of them. Let's see. Okay. Horning ran the ball 6 times for 45 yards. Taylor 6 times for 42 yards. You know, I mean, look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, Bart Starr ran it. Yeah, but I mean, like 9 different people run the ball. I mean, so that very, very good coverage. Very good coverage. All right, so now we got the Sunday Oregonian. Let's go to that one there. We're going to go to the August 30th edition, 1959, page 69 of the Sunday Oregonian. All right, here we go. Packers surprise Philadelphia 45-28. Upset is seen by 25,456 at the stadium. Here's the touchdown. Plows into the end zone. Lou Carpenter. All right. The Green Bay Packers seemingly certain to become once again a ruling power in the professional football wars. Oh, well, how right they are. They only knew how right they'd be. Humbled the Eagles 45-28 before a stunned throng of 25,456 pro-grid fans at Multnomah Stadium Saturday night. Sparked by a dazzling set of hard running backs and a cannily steered by quarterback Joe Francis of Oregon State College fame, the underdog Packers crashed and dashed their way to 6 touchdowns and, as icing on the victory cake, added a field goal and a half-dozen conversion points off the talented toes of Paul Hornung for the convincing one-sided triumph. About all the Eagles had to offer in rebuttal to the Green Bay class was a pass-and-catch act presented by Norm Van Brocklin and one-time University of Oregon Webfoot wonder boy and Tom McDonald, a half-pint wizard from Oklahoma University. Pair teams for 2 touchdowns. This incredible pair kept the Quaker City Club from suffering total disaster by teaming up for 2 of the Eagles' 4 touchdowns and setting the stage for another T-Day. Without these stars, Philadelphia Gritters would have been about as futile as the National Football baseball team in their home city. I guess meaning the Phillies, I guess. But as great as Van and Mac proved to be, they and the rest from the Eagles' nest were no match whatsoever for the king-size collection of gridiron Goliaths Coach Vince Lombardi has assembled for what he hopes will be a quick return to football glory that Green Bay has known in the past. Packers gained a running jump on their rivals of the mild late summer evening by scoring a touchdown before 5 minutes of the bruising battle had become history, and ripped the game wide open in the second panel with a 24-point explosion. After that, the Eagles, although they never quit trying, were doomed men. The crowd, one of the best since the parade of professional 11s in Portland was first launched, was lured to this exhibition by a heralded, I gotta find it here. That's not it. Heralded duel between Francis and Van Brocklin, and not any who filed through the stadium gates to view the performance should have felt cheated. Both Van and Joe staged a terrific show. As mentioned earlier, Van Brocklin, with the pass-snagging help of McDonald, was the Eagle standout, and Francis reportedly staking his chances of sticking with the Packers on his work in this encounter was equally as brilliant. Deadpan Joe, a one-man gang in his college days in Beaver Spangles, didn't do any running, nor did he toss a scoring pass, but his direction of the white jersey juggernaut from Green Bay was flawless, and his night's passing achievements of 6 completions and 8 throws for a fat total of 167 yards should be enough to guarantee his steady employment with the Lombardi firm. Significantly, the Packers' boss let Francis run the show until the Eagles were definitely dumped in the ditch, then turned the job over to a couple of other play callers. Neither appeared to inspire the club with the same fire as the hula-hipped warrior from Hawaii, Sports City. I don't know. Thrills come fast. The customers, some of whom stood through the entire fray on the east sidelines after early arrivals had filled all available general admission pews, didn't have to wait long for the thrills and excitement that are almost synonymous with the professional version of the fall sport. After the game opening kickoff had sailed out of the end zone, the Eagles took over on their 20, and in 5 plays, three arm. Oh, wait. 3 arm. Three of them completed by Van Brocklin moved relentlessly to the Packer 34. But there, the Green Bay Bears became tough, and Van, aware of the impenetrable wall facing him, tried to settle for 3 points, calling for a field goal by Bobby Walston of Georgia. Bobby's boot had enough oomph carrying into the end zone, but was off the beam, missing the uprights by a couple of feet. This, of course, gave the Packers life on their 20, and they covered the necessary 80 yards in exactly 5 plays, Warning accounting for the final 10 on a booming smack through the middle of the Philly line. The key maneuver in this drive was a perfectly executed screen pass from Francis to Alex Hawkins that up 53 yards and put the Eagles back on their heels. Chagrined by the early turn of the battle tide, the Eagles bounced right back with a matching touchdown, traveling 6 yards. No, that's wrong. Traveling, I'm not sure how many yards, in 13 plays. That payoff of the series being a 5-yard pass from Van Brocklin to Walt Kowalczyk, maybe. Fumble recovered. Along the way, most of the gains were products of the Dutchman's accurate arm, with Van showing no favorites as targets, but once locating McDonald for a nice 12-yard advance. Late in the quarter, the Eagles received a shot in the arm when Ed Kayak flopped on a Packer fumble, but Jim Taylor on a Packer fumble by Jim Taylor on the Green Bay 30. This time it took the Dutch and his cohorts just 7 plays to hit scoring soil, and what a thrill Norman McDonald furnished for the windup of the assault. Get this picture. Philadelphia 3rd down on the enemy 45. Van Brocklin drift back, scanning the field in front of him. Suddenly spots Tommy streaking toward the goal and fires. McDonald, running as though chased by 1,000 devils, is quickly surrounded by 3 defenders, but somehow plucks the ball from the air on the 5 and bounces jubilantly across. Results? 7 points in a 14-7 Philadelphia margin. Then the Packers scored 3 touchdowns. The Eagle lead, however, lasted about as long as a movie star marriage. For the right after McDonald's TD, the Packers suddenly went point mad and in an incredible 12 minutes scored 3 touchdowns and a field goal. Here, the chronological order of the carnage. The Packers with Francis tossing and bossing like an old vet went 80 yards in 11 plays. Luke Carpenter plunging the last 2 yards after Francis' pass had kept the machine rolling in high gear. Next, Horning thumped a field goal from 20 yards out after Bill Forrester had recovered a Philly fumble. Then Don McElhaney climaxed a 2-yard journey by ambling. 2-yard journey. Climaxed a 2-yard journey. That ain't right. By ambling 10 yards in 2 line plays after Bob Freeman had intercepted an Eagle pass. 44 seconds later, the same Freeman stepped in path of Van Brocklin heave on the Philly 30 and ran unmolested to the 3rd Green Bay touchdown. No one was near him as he made it the sprint, and the only menace he encountered came from Van himself. Honestly, nettled by the interception, the ex-Duck tried to hold down the fleeing foe, but unable to match his speed, took a wild swing at him as he raced by. That scoring outburst naturally broke the Eagles' backs and to some extent ended the excitement for the evening, even though each side went on to score 2 more touchdowns. Once again, here you go. You got all the stats here. Jim Taylor capping a near full field drive of 98 yards with a 4-yard plunge, and Howard Ferguson diving 1 yard to end a 41-yard advantage were the Packers' bell ringers. The Eagles' TDs came from the never-give-up Van Brocklin. Late in the third stanza, he rifled a 17-yard pass to McDonald, who made a line drive catch just before he stepped out of the end zone. And in the final chapter, the Dutchman located Thorn Sapp with a pass just a step away from the goal. Statistically, the rivals were fairly close. They finished with the Packers getting 414 yards to 467 by the Eagles. But 220 of the Green Bay gains were on the ground, while 404 of Philly dividends were in the air. This was only an exhibition, but the boys really played for keeps. They knocked heads as if the NFL flag was at stake. And 2 of them, Fred Fuzzy Thurston of the Packers and Tom Brookshire of the Eagles, swung so many noticeable punches that they were ejected by the officials. And here you go. Here's the and also here's the lineup still, right? And what do we got here? Quarterbacks here. Francis. Now the interesting thing, right, is that you get Francis and Starr came in for him. Now they had 4 quarterbacks. This is an exhibition game. Usually, right, in an exhibition game, the way it is nowadays, everybody gets in there. Maybe if they have 4 quarterbacks, at least 3 of them are going to see action. Here they had 4 quarterbacks, only saw 2 of them saw action. And just to go to show you how weird things were back then, right? Francis was in there, and then the eventual Hall of Fame quarterback, Bart Starr, replaced him. See, Vince Lombardi didn't know what he had with Starr yet at the time. He was trying to figure it out. This was only their 3rd preseason game. And there's the starting team for the Eagles on offense. All right, so now we got next. We'll go over to Green Bay Press Gazette. Try to hurry this up here because I'm already about an hour already. Share the screen. Now, this is the Monday. This game is played on Saturday, so this is the Monday version, the August 31st version of the Green Bay Press Gazette, page 15. All right. Packers rip Eagles behind Francis. Here's that same touchdown by Luke Carpenter. Bay defense dented in 45-28 win. Green Bay still holds the magic touch over the Philadelphia Eagles. Saturday night was no exception as the Packers rolled to a 45-28 victory over the Eagles in a non-league game here. Green Bay has won 14 out of the last 15 league starts against the Eagles. Green Bay offense was in high gear, but Coach Vince Lombardi wasn't too pleased with the defense. We're not aggressive enough on defense, Lombardi said after his club won its 2nd preseason game in 3 starts. It was the Packer ground game that overcame the arm of Norm Van Brocklin, playing before many of the same fans that watched him perform when he led the University of Oregon. Oddly enough, it was a former Oregon State star quarterback, Joe Francis, who helped punch Green Bay into a 31-14 halftime lead. Green Bay gained 220 yards on the ground, and not one of its touchdowns came on passes in the battle witnessed by 25,546 fans. The 6 touchdowns were split among 6 players. But what didn't please Lombardi beginning his first year as Packer head coach was the 404 yards the Eagles piled up through the air by completing 26 of 43 passes, and 3 of those passes were for touchdowns. In the end, Lombardi could thank his second period onslaught that brought 3 touchdowns and a field goal within 6 minutes. Pass interceptions figured in 2 of the touchdowns. 4 Packers carried the brunt of that running game: Lou Carpenter, Howard Ferguson, Paul Hornung, and Jim Taylor. Lombardi says that one of the 4 Green Bay quarterbacks will have to be trimmed from the squad. But after the game, he said he didn't know which one. He has Lamar McCann, Babe Pirelli, Bart Starr, and Francis to do the signal calling. Saturday night, only Francis and Starr played, and Francis, a tailback in Oregon State's single wing attack 2 years ago, hit on 6 of 8 passes for 167 yards. I was surprised by Francis, Lombardi said after the game. I may wait until after the next 3 games to make the decision. Francis passed to halfback Alex Hawkins for 53 yards, set up the first Green Bay score. I believe that was the screen pass, with Hornung sprinting over right guard for a 7-0 lead. It ended an 80-yard drive. It failed to hold up as the Eagle came back late in the quarter with the tying score on a pass from Van Brocklin to Walt Kowalczyk, I'm going to say, for 7 yards and a touchdown. Then the Eagles got their only lead of the game early in the second period on a 44-yard pass from Van Brocklin to Tommy McDonald. Then the roof fell in on the Eagles. Within 6 minutes, this happened. Lou Carpenter climaxed an 80-yard march by plunging over for a touchdown from the 2-yard line. Hornung kicked a 21-yard field goal following an Eagle fumble. Halfback Don McElhaney went 4 yards for a score after Bob Freeman had intercepted a pass. And less than a minute later, Freeman snagged another Van Brocklin pass and raced 30 yards down the sideline for a touchdown. That made it 31-14 at halftime, and the Eagles never could come back. The Packers added another touchdown midway in the third period on a 97-yard drive as Taylor romped over from the 4. Philadelphia came back with a touchdown on a 17-yard pass from Van Brocklin to McDonald. Philadelphia pulled to 38-28 early in the final period when Clarence Peak smashed over from the 2, but the Packers added another score midway in the quarter on a 1-yard plunge by Ferguson. It was the Eagles' second loss in 3 preseason starts. All right, so then we got that, and then we have the last one here. Now we're at a little over an hour, so I'll try to rip this off here real fast. All right, we have the Philadelphia Inquirer. Where are we at here? Here we go. The August 30th edition, page 81 of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Here we go. Packers whip Eagles 45-28 in a coast game. Portland, Oregon, August 29th. Philadelphia Eagles and the Green Bay Packers collided here Saturday night in a National Football League exhibition game. The Packers won 45-28. A shirt-sleeve crowd was on hand as the 2 clubs met in warm weather under clear skies. The game matched a pair of former Oregon Collegiate stars at quarterback, Green Bay's Joe Francis, ex-Oregon State Gritter, and Philadelphia's Norm Van Brocklin, ex-University of Oregon great. Each team had 1-1 records. I believe the Eagles won their first game, then lost their second game. The Packers lost their first game and won their second game of the exhibition season. Both teams went into the game with a 1-1 preseason record, but in 14 previous meetings between the clubs, the Packers have won 13. The Packers' win this year was a 24-17 victory over the San Francisco 49ers. Their loss was a 19-16 loss at the hands of the Chicago Bears. Bears also beaten the Eagles this year at a 24-21 defeat. The Eagles' win was a 21-17 victory over the New York Giants. The Eagles battled back. The Eagles overcame an early, don't forget, this is a Philadelphia paper, right? Philadelphia Inquirer. The Eagles overcame an early 7-0 Green Bay lead when Norm Van Brocklin led a 66-yard march to tie the score at the quarter. Packers had taken the lead when they went 80 yards in 5 plays with halfback Paul Hornung breaking off right tackle from final 10 yards with 10 minutes and 11 seconds left in the first period. A 53-yard pass from Joe Francis to halfback Alex Hawkins set up the score. Now, once again, I think that was the screen pass. But Van Brocklin led the Eagles back. The Eagles drove to the Green Bay 17, but a loss set them back to the 19. Then Van Brocklin passed to Tommy McDonald for 12 yards and to Walt Kowalczyk for the final 7. Bobby Walson's kick tied the score at 7 with 2:49 left in the first period. Horning booted the conversion for the Packers. The Eagles went ahead. The Eagles got the lead in the early second quarter, but then lost it to an onslaught of 3 Green Bay touchdowns and a field goal. The Birds went ahead 14-7 with 12:06 left in the second quarter as Van Brocklin hit McDonald on a 44-yard pass on the goal line. Dick Bielski, booted the conversion. Then Green Bay marched 80 yards with Luke Carpenter booming over guard for the score at 6:53. Then a fumble set up a 21-yard field goal by Paul Horning with 4:44 remaining in the second quarter. Pass interception figured in the next 2 touchdowns. After getting the ball on a 24 on an interception, the Packers scored when halfback Don McElhaney went the final 3 yards with 1 minute 37 seconds left to go. And with 53 seconds left, Green Bay Bob Freeman picked off a Van Brocklin pass and raced 30 yards for a touchdown. Horning booted all 3 conversions for a 31-14 halftime Packer lead. Packers hiked the lead. The Packers increased their lead to 38-14 midway in the quarter when fullback Jimmy Taylor capped a 97-yard drive by going over from 5 with 7:05 left. Horning again kicked the extra point. The Eagles came back to make it 38-21 by taking advantage of a Green Bay fumble. Taking over on the Green Bay 27, 3 plays later, the Eagles had scored on a 27-yard pass from Van Brocklin to McDonald. It came with 3:46 left in the quarter, and Bielski once again kicked the conversion. The Eagle had an early second half threat go awry. This came when they drove to the Green Bay 13, but an interception ended it. And that's all they got for that one there. Right. That is it. Don't even have a picture. It is what it is. But it's a very, very exciting game. But once again, it was all preseason. As I said, don't forget. I mean, so nowadays, how we're playing 17 game schedule. We got 3 preseason games. Well, back then they were playing a 12-game schedule, but they were playing 6 preseason games. So for both these teams, the Packers and the Eagles, this would be their 3rd preseason game. Obviously, they got 3 more left to go. And so that's the way it was on this date, August 29th, 1959. Between the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles at Multnomah Stadium in Oregon in pro football's first 50 years. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.